My parents abandoned me at a train station as a joke. "Let's see how she finds her way home," my mother shouted as they drove away laughing. I never went back. 20 years later, they found me. This morning, 29 missed calls from an unknown Pennsylvania number lit up my phone like a nuclear warning. I'm Megan Miller now, 32 years old, and I run Miller Creative Design from my $485,000 home in Chicago's Lincoln Park. My business generates $124,000 annually. I have $78,000 in savings, and my husband Brian runs a successful photography studio. But seeing that area code transported me back to being 12-year-old Jennifer Taylor, standing alone at Union Station, watching my parents drive away laughing. The voicemail was from my brother Ethan. "Dad had a heart attack. It's bad. Mom's a mess. I thought you should know." 20 years of silence, and now they wanted something from me. The irony was perfect. The people who had literally abandoned me now needed me to come running when convenient for them. But they had no idea who they were dealing with now. I wasn't the powerless child they'd discarded. I was a successful business owner with professional connections spanning 3 states, married to a man whose family actually knew how to love, with resources and legal knowledge they couldn't imagine. Most importantly, I had something they'd never possessed, the ability to make strategic decisions based on logic rather than cruelty. My first call was to Dr. Reynolds, my therapist, who had helped me process years of childhood trauma. "Your reaction is completely normal," she assured me during an emergency session. "This connects to your core abandonment trauma. But remember, you're not that powerless 12-year-old anymore. You're engaging from a position of strength." She was right. At 12, I had been completely dependent on Frank and Karen Taylor, owners of Ridgeview's largest hardware store and bakery, respectively. They were pillars of the community, known for their charitable donations and perfect family image. Behind closed doors, they specialized in what they called tough love, emotional abuse disguised as life lessons. The train station incident hadn't been random cruelty. It was their response to me receiving an A- in science, which they deemed unacceptable. "She needs to learn that life doesn't hand you anything," I'd overheard Dad tell Mom the night before. "She's too soft, too sensitive. Maybe she needs a real lesson, something she won't forget." They drove me 3 hours to Chicago, told me to wait by a pillar while they moved the car, then deliberately drove past the station windows so I could see them leaving. Mom rolled down her window to shout those words that changed everything. "Let's see how she finds her way home." What they hadn't expected was the chain reaction their lesson would trigger. Station employee Janet noticed me after 2 hours of panic, called security, who called police, who called Child Protective Services. By evening, I was in emergency foster care with a caseworker documenting parental abandonment, a felony in Illinois. When authorities finally reached my parents, their response was predictable. They claimed it was a controlled life lesson to teach independence. They insisted they'd planned to call the station after a few hours to check on me, a lie that crumbled when investigators found no evidence of such planning. They'd signed away their parental rights rather than admit wrongdoing or complete mandatory parenting classes. That abandonment led me to Thomas and Lisa Miller, who became my real parents through adoption when I was 13. Thomas taught high school art, Lisa was a pediatric nurse, and they showed me what actual parenting looked like. They funded my education at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, supported my business launch, and walked me down the aisle at my wedding. They'd given me everything Frank and Karen Taylor had withheld: unconditional love, financial support, and emotional stability. Now, armed with 2 decades of healing and professional success, I had strategic advantages my birth parents couldn't comprehend. My corporate consulting background had taught me crisis management and negotiation tactics. My business required maintaining relationships with lawyers, accountants, and strategic advisors. My marriage to Brian connected me to his family's network of professionals. Most importantly, I had complete financial independence from the people who'd once controlled my life through economic dependency. My second call was to David Fletcher, the attorney who'd handled my adoption paperwork. "They have no legal standing," he confirmed. "Your adoption legally severed all parental rights and obligations. Any contact is entirely voluntary on your part." "But let's discuss documentation," he continued. "If you choose to engage, I recommend thoroughly documenting all interactions. Given their history of manipulation and abandonment, creating a legal record protects you if their behavior escalates." This was exactly the kind of strategic thinking my birth parents lacked. They operated on emotion and impulse. I operated with professional counsel and documented evidence. My third call was to Marcus Blake, a private investigator I'd worked with on business security issues. "I need a comprehensive background check," I explained. "Financial status, employment history, legal troubles, current living situation, everything." Marcus's report arrived within 48 hours and painted a picture of two people whose lives had deteriorated significantly since I'd left. Frank had retired early due to health issues, selling the hardware store for much less than expected after years of declining profits. Karen's bakery had closed during the 2008 recession. They now lived on Social Security and Frank's minimal pension, struggling to maintain their mortgage on the family home. More interesting was their social situation. Several former friends had distanced themselves after learning the truth about my disappearance. Ethan lived an hour away and visited monthly, but his wife Nancy actively discouraged closer contact. Their golden child son had become their only family connection, and even that relationship was strained. "Here's the strategic element," Marcus noted during our phone consultation. "They're financially vulnerable, socially isolated, and facing significant medical expenses. Your brother's the one maintaining minimal family contact, which suggests he's caught between duty and recognition of their flaws." This information transformed my understanding of the situation. They weren't reaching out from strength or entitlement. They were desperate, aging people facing mortality with limited support systems. The power dynamic had completely reversed. My fourth call was to my real parents, Thomas and Lisa Miller. "Whatever you decide, we support completely," Lisa assured me. "Your relationship or lack thereof with them doesn't change anything between us. You're our daughter, period." "But remember," Thomas added, "you have something they never gave you, the ability to choose your responses based on what's healthiest for you, not what others demand." After extensive consultation with my professional network and internal reflection, I developed a strategic approach. I would engage with Ethan first, gathering information while maintaining strict boundaries. I would not be emotional or reactive. I would document everything. Most importantly, I would engage from a position of absolute strength, making clear that any contact was voluntary and conditional on respectful behavior. I texted Ethan, "This is Megan. I got your message about Dad. I need more information before deciding my next steps. How serious is his condition? What exactly do you and Mom expect from me?" His reply came within minutes. "Thank you for responding. Major heart attack, stable but critical. Triple bypass scheduled tomorrow. Mom's a mess. We don't expect anything. Just thought you should know. Would understand completely if you want no part of this." The sincerity surprised me, but I remained strategic. "I need time to think. We'll be in touch." Over the next 3 days, I conducted what amounted to a professional risk assessment. I spoke with Dr. Reynolds about psychological impacts, consulted with David Fletcher about legal protections, and discussed emotional boundaries with Brian and my real parents. The conclusion was clear. I would meet with Ethan at a neutral location to assess the situation, but under strict conditions. Any contact with Frank and Karen would be entirely on my terms. I would not be manipulated by medical emergencies or guilt tactics. I would document everything for potential legal action if they violated boundaries. We met at a coffee shop halfway between Chicago and Ridge View. Seeing Ethan after 20 years was jarring. The golden child athlete I remembered was now a middle-aged accountant with thinning hair and tired eyes. "Thank you for coming," he said awkwardly. "You look great, really successful." I got straight to business. "Tell me about Dad's condition and what you realistically expect from this contact." Ethan provided medical details with surprising honesty. Triple bypass surgery had been successful, but complications from decades of poor health choices made recovery uncertain. Frank was 68 with high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and ongoing alcohol problems. More importantly, Ethan revealed family dynamics I hadn't expected. "After you left, things changed, or maybe I just started seeing more clearly. They never took responsibility for what happened. There were stories they told themselves and everyone else about you being rebellious and cutting contact despite their best efforts." "And you let them?" I asked directly. "Yes," he admitted. "For years I did. It was easier than confronting what really happened, but especially after having my own kids, watching my daughter Emma grow up. She's 12 now, the same age you were when—" He couldn't finish the sentence, but his meaning was clear. Parenthood had given him perspective on exactly how abusive our parents' behavior had been. "Have they ever expressed genuine remorse?" I pressed. "Not regret that I left, but actual understanding of what they did wrong?" Ethan hesitated. "Dad has said things when drinking about going too far, wishing things were different. Mom struggles more with taking responsibility. But they've both asked about you over the years. They keep your high school photo on their mantle." The image of my younger self preserved in their home like a memorial disturbed me. They'd created a shrine to the daughter they'd abandoned while remaining ignorant of the successful woman I'd become. "Would you consider visiting Dad in the hospital?" Ethan asked. "You wouldn't have to talk to him if you prefer, and I can make sure Mom isn't there." I considered the request through my strategic framework. This could provide closure while demonstrating my position of strength. I could face them as the successful adult I'd become rather than the powerless child they'd abandoned. "I'll think about it," I replied. "But understand, any visit happens on my terms. I can leave anytime. They will not guilt me or make demands. This is information gathering, not reconciliation." After consulting with Dr. Reynolds, I decided to visit the hospital with her accompanying me as professional support. This wasn't about emotions or family obligation. It was about facing my past from a position of absolute strength and closing that chapter definitively. The cardiac ICU at Ridgeview General was exactly what I expected from their declining small town. Outdated equipment, overworked staff, the kind of medical facility that reflected their reduced circumstances. Ethan waited nervously as Dr. Reynolds and I approached Frank's room. Seeing him was shocking in ways I hadn't anticipated. The larger-than-life figure from my childhood memories was now a diminished old man connected to monitoring equipment, nasal oxygen cannula, obviously post-surgical and vulnerable. His eyes opened when we entered, widening in recognition. "Jennifer," he whispered. "It's Megan now," I corrected firmly. "Megan," he repeated, testing the unfamiliar name. "You came." I remained near the doorway, maintaining physical and emotional distance. "Yes." The silence stretched between us, 20 years of absence compressed into this moment. Finally, he spoke. "You look like your mother." "I look like Lisa Miller," I replied, "my adoptive mother." His face tightened, then relaxed into resignation. "Of course. I deserve that." Dr. Reynolds stood behind me, her presence grounding and professional. Ethan hovered awkwardly, clearly uncertain of his role. "Why did you want to see me?" I asked directly. Frank seemed taken aback. "You're my daughter." "I was your daughter, until you decided a 12-year-old needed to find her own way home from Chicago." He flinched visibly. "We made a mistake. A terrible mistake." "A mistake is forgetting to pick someone up," I said, my voice steady with professional authority. What you did was deliberate cruelty disguised as parenting." "You're right," he said quietly. "There's no excuse. When you're facing the end, you see things differently. What we did to you is my biggest regret." It was the closest thing to accountability I'd ever heard from him, but it felt insufficient against decades of trauma. The conversation was interrupted when Karen appeared in the doorway, coffee cup in hand, staring at me like she'd seen a ghost. "Jennifer," she breathed. "It's Megan," Ethan corrected quickly. At 65, Karen was still carefully presenting herself. Colored hair, applied makeup, tailored clothes, even in this setting. Only her eyes betrayed her age and stress. She moved toward me but stopped when I stepped back instinctively. "You're so beautiful, all grown up." I remained silent, unprepared for this additional confrontation. "I've thought about you every day," she continued, tears forming. "Wondered where you were, if you were happy, if you ever thought about us." "Karen," Frank warned weakly from his bed, "give her space." The irony of Frank Taylor advocating for boundaries wasn't lost on me. "I need some air," I announced, turning toward the door. Dr. Reynolds immediately moved to accompany me. "Please don't leave," Karen called after me. "Please, we've missed you so much." I paused in the doorway, turning back to face both birth parents. Years of unexpressed anger finally found voice with professional precision. "You missed me? You abandoned me in a strange city when I was 12 years old. You drove away laughing while I watched. You surrendered your parental rights rather than admit wrongdoing. And now, 20 years later, you want to discuss missing me." Karen flinched as if physically struck. "We were terrible parents. We didn't know how to love you properly." "That's not an excuse," I replied. "Millions of people figure out how to parent without abandoning their children in different states." "You're right," Frank interjected from his bed. "There is no excuse. We failed you completely." The simple acknowledgement, void of justification, momentarily disarmed me. This was what I'd needed to hear decades ago. "I didn't come here for apologies," I said finally. "I came to see for myself that the people who once had such power over me are just that, people. Flawed, aging, ordinary people who made unforgivable choices." "Is there any chance?" Karen began. "No," I interrupted. "There's no chance of reconciliation. That opportunity ended the moment you drove away from Union Station. What I can offer is closure for all of us." I looked directly at Frank in his hospital bed. "I hope you recover fully from your surgery. I don't wish either of you ill. But I need you to understand that I am not Jennifer Taylor anymore. I haven't been for 20 years. I'm Megan Miller. I have wonderful adoptive parents, a loving husband, a successful career, and a life built far away from the damage you caused." My voice remained steady as I continued. "I don't hate you anymore. That's taken years of work. But I don't forgive you either, and I don't want you in my life. Any future contact should go through Ethan first, and I reserve the right to ignore it completely." The finality of my statement hung in the air. Karen sobbed quietly while Frank closed his eyes, a single tear tracking down his weathered cheek. "We understand," he said finally. Dr. Reynolds and I left shortly after. In the parking lot, I took a deep breath of fresh air, feeling lighter than I had in years. "How are you feeling?" Dr. Reynolds asked. "Like I finally got to be the adult in the room with them," I replied. "Like I took back the power they had over me for so long." Over the following weeks, I processed the encounter through additional therapy sessions and conversations with my real family. The experience had been draining but ultimately empowering. I had faced my abusers on my terms and walked away intact. Ethan provided medical updates that I acknowledged but didn't feel obligated to act upon. Frank recovered from his surgery but faced ongoing health issues. More importantly, I made clear that while I was open to minimal contact with my brother, my boundaries regarding Frank and Karen remained absolute. The real victory came in my professional life. Within a month of the hospital confrontation, I landed 3 major clients who'd heard about my work through referrals. Miller Creative's revenue jumped to $156,000 annually. I expanded my home office, hired a part-time assistant, and was featured in Chicago Design Magazine as one of 30 under 35 creative entrepreneurs to watch. Meanwhile, Frank and Karen's situation continued deteriorating. Medical bills from the heart attack consumed most of their savings. Frank's recovery was complicated by his refusal to stop drinking. Karen developed her own health issues, likely stress-related. Their social isolation deepened as former friends learned more details about what had really happened to their daughter. The most satisfying element was watching Ethan establish his own boundaries with them. His wife, Nancy, had apparently been encouraging him for years to limit contact, and my reappearance gave him permission to prioritize his own family's well-being over his parents' demands. "Seeing you successfully build a life without them showed me it was possible," he told me during a brief phone conversation. "Emma asked me why Grandpa and Grandma Taylor never talk about Aunt Megan, and I realized I couldn't keep protecting their version of events." 6 months after the hospital visit, I received an envelope with no return address. Inside was a newspaper clipping, Frank Taylor's obituary from the Ridgeview Gazette. He'd suffered another heart attack at home, dying before paramedics arrived. The obituary listed surviving family as beloved wife Karen and devoted son Ethan. No mention of a daughter who'd disappeared or been estranged. Even in death, they maintained their fictional narrative. I felt nothing reading it. No sadness, no relief, just confirmation that a chapter I'd already closed was definitively finished. Karen made one final attempt at contact through Ethan, asking if I would attend the funeral. My response was brief and final. "No, I buried Jennifer Taylor 20 years ago when her parents abandoned her at Union Station. Megan Miller has nothing to do with Frank Taylor's death." Today, 3 years after those 29 missed calls disrupted my morning, I'm sitting in my expanded home office, reviewing contracts for a $47,000 rebranding project with a Fortune 500 company. Brian just brought me coffee in a mug that says, "World's Best Daughter," a gift from Lisa and Thomas Miller for my 35th birthday. Through my window, I can see Scout playing in our backyard garden with the neighbor children. The rescue dog we adopted 2 years ago has never known abandonment or cruelty, only consistent love and safety. He represents everything my adoptive family gave me that my birth family couldn't comprehend. The final irony is perfect. Frank and Karen Taylor spent their lives believing they were teaching strength through cruelty, independence through abandonment. Instead, they created exactly what they claimed to despise, a daughter who truly didn't need them. Their lesson at Union Station taught me the most valuable skill possible: how to build a family based on choice rather than biology, love rather than obligation. The scared 12-year-old they laughingly abandoned became a successful businesswoman who rebuilt her life completely without them. They died still believing they'd been wronged, never understanding that their cruelty had freed me to find real love and genuine success. Sometimes the best revenge is simply living well, but the sweetest revenge is living so well that your abusers become completely irrelevant to your happiness.